In the dark streets of a big city, a homeless boy, dressed in worn clothes and with messy hair, wanders among the passers-by without anyone paying attention to him. The city's noises, the honking horns, muffled conversations, and hurried footsteps, blend into a cacophony that seems foreign to him, as if he belongs to another world, a world invisible to the eyes of others. Yet, this child has seen things that no one would guess. Behind his young but weary eyes lies wisdom forged by the streets, an experience of life far beyond his years. His skin, marked by the cold and the wind, and his surprisingly bright eyes are the witnesses of an existence he did not choose, but one he has learned to understand. He has a sharp view of the world around him, observing with particular attention those who have everything and those who have nothing. Where others see blurred faces, he discerns the invisible scars of those who walk in luxury, the masks of indifference worn by the rich, and the quiet fear of those who hide their flaws behind an apparent stability. But he also sees the tired faces of workers struggling to survive, the calloused hands of men and women who, like him, know the pain of lack. His eyes follow the gestures of the passers-by with almost unsettling precision, perceiving stories in their movements, in the exchanged glances, in the small flaws others do not notice. The noise of the world continuing to spin around him seems like a film he observes from a distance, a film in which he is neither an actor nor a spectator, but a mere silent witness. One evening, as he stands near a luxury restaurant, a boy watches intently the comings and goings of a fashionable clientele, lingering on the shiny cars arriving in front of the establishment and the elegantly dressed people stepping out. He soon notices a wealthy and influential man, a billionaire named Victor Devereaux, a regular at the place, preparing to dine outside the establishment. The elegant couple seems ready for a quiet evening, or so the boy thinks as he watches them. Victor Devereaux, in a tailor-made suit, appears absorbed in conversation, a smirk on his lips. He occasionally glances at the crowd, checking for the admiring gazes of passers-by, like a man used to being seen and feared. Beside him is his wife, Elizabeth, a cold and mysterious beauty, embodying the very image of perfection. Always impeccable, her blonde hair is carefully styled, and her evening gown, effortlessly elegant, seems to draw all eyes without her needing to make a single move. However, her gaze is an ocean of calm and indifference. She rarely smiles, but her cold beauty and aristocratic demeanor are enough to captivate everyone's attention. The boy, standing at a distance, delights in the perfect image they form, watching with almost obsessive fascination every movement. He is not used to mingling with this world, seeing these people whose lives seem unreal, almost unattainable. As he follows the couple's gestures, his eyes fall on the lavish dinner taking place in front of him. Refined dishes, fine wines, whispered conversations in a language that, in his humble place, he can only imagine. Suddenly, a detail catches his attention, a discreet but significant gesture. Elizabeth, with a fluid and imperceptible movement, slips something into her husband's glass, a small object or perhaps a substance. He cannot be sure, but something in his instinct tells him he saw correctly. He freezes, his eyes wide open, his heart pounding faster in his chest. The boy leans slightly forward, scrutinizing the scene from all angles, wondering if he really saw what he thinks he saw. Elizabeth doesn't seem to have noticed his observation. She continues to smile, talking as if nothing is wrong, while Victor, absorbed in his world, raises his glass, unaware of the trap being set before his eyes. The boy, now captive to the scene, wonders who Elizabeth Devereaux truly is, and why this gesture was so subtle, almost fleeting, if not to conceal something much darker than he had initially imagined. The way she acted, so calm, so sure of herself, contrasted with the growing unease in the boy. He felt like a powerless spectator, caught in a whirlwind he didn't yet fully understand, but one that seemed to be rushing toward an inevitable end. The boy furrows his brow, a strange sensation growing in his chest. A sharp intuition, stronger than mere curiosity, tells him he must intervene. Something in the air, in the atmosphere around the table, tells him that this is not just an ordinary dinner. He had seen enough films, enough scenes of manipulation to recognize the signs of imminent danger. But what troubled him even more was the unyielding calm of the situation. Elizabeth, with her relaxed air, as if she were playing a game whose rules she controlled, had nothing to do with a woman at a simple romantic dinner. It felt like he was observing a Machiavellian act, far more complex than he had imagined. The boy bites his lip, hesitating for a moment. Then, without wasting time, he straightens up suddenly, his heart pounding in his chest. The need to do something is stronger than the fear that invades him. His instinct tells him he must act before it's too late. He takes a deep breath and slips between the tables, his gaze fixed on the scene before him. The other diners around him seem indifferent, oblivious to what is unfolding just a few meters away. He finally reaches the Devereux's table, a glint of panic in his eyes, and, in a trembling but urgent voice, exclaims, "Don't drink that. Your wife put poison in it." The silence that follows is heavy, oppressive. Victor, who had been about to bring the glass to his lips, freezes upon hearing the boy's words. His eyes widen, trying to understand where this accusation came from. Elizabeth, on the other hand, doesn't appear disturbed. A strange smile forms on her lips. A smile the boy doesn't immediately recognize, as if she had been waiting for this very moment. The billionaire, initially shocked by the boy's audacity, slowly puts down his glass, his gaze fixed on the child who has just shattered their bubble of luxury. The moment seems suspended in time, a striking contrast between the couple's unwavering elegance and the unexpected boldness of the boy, whose presence, seemingly insignificant at first glance, now shakes everything. The other guests around them turn their attention to the scene, some whisper, others look curiously, captivated by what seems like an unreal moment in this world of opulence. The faint clinking of cutlery, the murmurs of conversations, all fade, replaced by the buzz of palpable tension. The whispers intensify, furtive glances are exchanged, but no one dares to intervene. Devereux, initially stunned by the boy's audacity, quickly regains his composure, a cold smile forming on his lips. His gaze, once filled with confusion, now becomes sharp, almost threatening. He stares at the child with a mix of indignation and contempt, as though he cannot understand the reason for this intrusion into his perfect world, as if this impudent little boy dared to disturb his unshakable order. His face hardens, and in a slow but authoritative voice, he retorts, "Who are you to accuse me of such things? Leave before I completely ignore you." The words, though simple, resonate with the coldness of an unyielding command, an attempt to put things back in place in a universe where he, Devereux, is king. He expects the boy to back down, to crumble under the pressure, as so many others would have done. But, to his surprise, Elizabeth, in a cold, authoritative tone, as if this scene were nothing more than a minor inconvenience in her dinner, orders the boy to leave with a simple wave of her hand. Her gaze is merciless, as if she is dismissing the irritation of this interruption with a flick of her wrist. She waits for the child to disappear, for him to realize his insignificance in the face of the vast wealth and power that she and her husband represent. However, to everyone's surprise, the boy does not retreat. On the contrary, he stands taller, a spark of defiance in his eyes. His posture, once hesitant, transforms into a surprising burst of courage for his age. He looks directly at Victor Devereux, without a hint of fear, his gaze locked with the billionaire's. The boy seems to have crossed an invisible boundary, the boundary of fear. His voice, though trembling at first, grows firmer, stronger. "You can't make me leave. I'm sure of what I saw." His words echo in the silence that has settled around the table. The air, suddenly frozen, seems charged with palpable tension, as if time itself has stopped. The boy, overwhelmed by the weight of the gazes fixed on him, feels a burning heat in his back, but instead of being shaken, he remains rooted in his conviction. Every fiber of his being is focused on this moment, on this truth he has decided to speak aloud, despite the obvious opposition. His courage becomes a shockwave that travels through the room, striking the consciences of those around him. Some guests, initially hesitant, turn toward him with a glimmer of uncertainty in their eyes, trying to understand what is happening. Others, more sensitive to the sincerity emanating from him, begin to change their view, convinced by the authenticity of the boy. He is no longer part of the decor of this fancy restaurant, but becomes a central figure, a witness and an actor in this scene far larger than he could have imagined. Devereux, his fists clenched beneath the table, feels a surge of displeasure, but he suppresses this emotion with bewildering speed. In an instant, he shifts from irritation to cold calculation. His face closes, and a glimmer of hostility, carefully concealed, flickers in his eyes. The billionaire slowly turns toward his wife, exchanging a knowing glance. It is not just an exchange, it is a silent connection, a mutual agreement, an implicit reminder of their power and superiority. Their gaze says it all. They are, at this moment, partners in this gesture, this scheme that has yet to fully unfold but is already hanging in the air of the restaurant. Elizabeth, for her part, does not react. Her expression remains unperturbed, frozen in icy serenity. Yet, in her dark eyes, a gleam of defiance shines through, an almost indefinable glint but resolutely present, as if she is savoring this confrontation, as if she has been waiting for this moment with controlled impatience. "Don't listen to him," she says in a distant tone, not even giving the boy her full attention. "He's just a poor homeless kid looking for attention." Devereux's wife's words hit the boy like a slap. He feels a sharp pang in his chest, a bitter taste of frustration that floods his lips. Her words, laced with condescension, aim to devalue him, to bring him down, to reduce him to what he hates most, an insignificant being, invisible in the eyes of society, a pawn in a game that is beyond him. But unexpectedly, this remark doesn't extinguish his inner fire. On the contrary, it fuels his determination. He stands taller, much stronger than before, refusing to let her words break him. He fixes his gaze directly on Elizabeth, his eyes sharp and relentless, and in a calm but assured voice, he responds, "I have nothing to gain by saying this. I'm warning you so no one falls into your trap." The guests around the table exchange furtive glances, some straining to hear, others shuddering under the weight of his words. They feel the change in him, the transformation of a boy who was initially there by chance, but who, at this moment, has become the true actor in this scene. The Devereux table, once a symbol of immense wealth and an aura of invulnerability, suddenly seems more vulnerable. The laughter and murmurs of the other guests, once indifferent, have now faded. The air, once light, has grown heavy with the truth the boy has dared to launch into the room. Elizabeth, still cold, tries to regain control of the situation. But something has shifted in her demeanor. This boy, this mere child who is nothing to her, is beginning to disturb her. The way he confronts her forces her to step back, making her realize that perhaps she does not have the power she thought she wielded here. Her piercing gaze grows harder, and a slight movement of her hand signals to Victor. The billionaire, realizing that the situation is slipping from his grasp, attempts to regain control, but doubt begins to creep into his mind. Does this child really know something? Are the games they play so well hidden that even a simple boy could uncover them? The boy, despite the coldness surrounding him, feels more powerful than ever. He does not lower his eyes, does not give in to fear or intimidation. He knows that he is about to trigger something far bigger than what he had imagined when he first stepped into this confrontation. Minutes tick by in heavy silence, each exchange between the protagonists seeming to strike like a hammer against the pristine facade of the Devereux. The glances exchanged in the room grow more insistent, more penetrating, the murmurs blending with the soft clinking of silverware on porcelain. The Devereux, once so accustomed to reigning over this place with a nonchalant confidence, begin to show signs of palpable nervousness. Finally, as the tension peaks, a young waitress approaches slowly, almost hesitantly. Her hands tremble slightly as she whispers something into the ear of the maitre d', visibly disturbed. He, after a brief exchange of glances with her, straightens up, his expression transforming into a mask of solemn gravity. He steps toward the Devereux table, immediately attracting the attention of all the diners, who pause their conversations to observe the scene. "Mr. Devereux, there is a problem we need to address immediately," he says, pausing for effect. His voice, low and measured, still carries through the oppressive silence. "A suspicious substance has been found in your glass. We need to conduct an urgent check." A chilling silence falls over the room. The Devereux' faces lose color instantly. Elizabeth, usually a master at concealing her emotions, widens her eyes in genuine astonishment. Her fingers, once elegantly resting on the edge of her plate, tighten slightly. She slowly turns her head toward Victor, searching for an explanation or a form of comfort, but her gaze meets only emptiness. Victor, on the other hand, seems frozen, trapped in a waking nightmare. His features harden, but a cold sweat beads on his forehead, betraying a panic he struggles to contain. His eyes scan the room, desperately searching for an escape, a solution, or perhaps even an ally among the faces of the crowd, but he finds nothing but accusing or curious stares. The overwhelming confidence he had displayed just moments ago fades, replaced by a low, gnawing fear, one that belongs to a man accustomed to controlling everything but now suddenly faced with the unpredictable. Around them, the other diners exchange knowing glances, murmuring low speculations as the whispers intensify like an echo of the growing tension. Some seem delighted to see the Devereaux rattled, others watch the scene with a mix of fascination and concern. A waitress hastily places a tray on a nearby table, her hurried movements reflecting the effect of the heavy atmosphere. Elizabeth slowly turns toward the maitre d', her movements carefully measured, as if she is trying to contain the emotional storm threatening to overwhelm her. Her eyes, usually filled with icy assurance, reflect a glimmer of anxiety she struggles to mask. Her voice, though calm, betrays a slight tremor. "What exactly is going on?" she asks, articulating each word with calculated precision, as if the syllables could restore some semblance of control over the situation. "A mistake, perhaps. A misunderstanding." But the maitre d' remains unyielding, his face closed, almost stern. He slowly shakes his head, his hands clasped in front of him in a gesture that evokes both discipline and gravity. His voice, though surprisingly soft, resounds like a verdict in the oppressive silence of the room. "We need to clarify this immediately, madam. For your safety and that of the other guests." These words, spoken with a chilling calmness, strike like a thunderclap. A shiver runs through the room, palpable, almost visible. The conversations, already muted, fade entirely, and the faces turn toward the scene with an almost morbid attention. The tension is so thick it seems suspended in the air, pressing on every breath. Elizabeth blinks, as if struggling to comprehend what has just been said. She opens her mouth to respond, but no words come out. Her right hand instinctively rests on the edge of the table, her fingers tightening on the polished wood, while her other hand mechanically moves to her throat, brushing the pearl necklace she wears, as if seeking a futile gesture of reassurance. Victor, sitting beside her, stiffens further, his face frozen in an unreadable expression. His features, usually harsh and imposing, suddenly appear aged, worn down by a fear he is awkwardly trying to mask. His eyes divert from Elizabeth to fix on the maitre d', but their shine is absent. It seems as though he is desperately searching for an escape, a flaw in this inextricable situation, but nothing comes. Around them, the murmurs resume, discreet but impossible to ignore. "What's happening?" a woman whispers to her neighbor, her eyes gleaming with almost malicious curiosity. "A substance. Maybe poison," murmurs a man farther away, his voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and horror. Hypotheses circulate quickly, feeding off the ambient fear. Some diners exchange knowing glances, secretly savoring the apparent fall of the Devereaux, those figures who had long seemed untouchable. A waitress, who had stopped mid-action to observe, resumes her work hurriedly, almost knocking over a glass in her rush. Her cheeks redden, but her movements remain awkward, as if she too is affected by the weight of the scene unfolding. The maitre d' subtly gestures to two servers positioned near the entrance, and they immediately begin moving, their faces serious. They head toward the table with a determination that leaves no room for doubt. An exceptional procedure is underway. Elizabeth, sensing the trap closing in, straightens slightly, trying to regain her composure. "This is absurd," she declares, her voice firmer but still trembling. "We've dined here dozens of times, and nothing like this has ever happened. Victor, say something." Victor, however, remains silent, his gaze fixed and distant. His hands, resting on his knees, tremble imperceptibly. This silence, to those observing, speaks more than any protest could. Finally, after what feels like an interminable wait, the maitre d' returns, accompanied by a man in uniform, clearly a security officer of the establishment. In his hand, he holds a small sealed bag containing a sample of liquid taken from the suspicious glass. Both wear serious expressions, and the already tense atmosphere thickens further. The guests, captivated, follow every movement with feverish attention. Mr. and Mrs. Devereux, the maitre d' begins in a solemn voice. We have conducted a quick analysis of the contents of your glass. There is a toxic substance. He pauses, allowing the words to hang heavily in the air. A violent poison. A murmur of disbelief spreads through the assembly. A woman stifles a small cry, covering her mouth with her gloved hand. Glances multiply, intersect, and question. The unthinkable has become reality. The Devereux, so powerful, so unshakable, are suddenly caught in a scandalous and dangerous situation. Elizabeth's eyes widen, feigning horror. Poison. But this is madness. How could this have happened? Her voice trembles just enough to give the impression of panic, but those watching closely can detect a discordant note, a tension in her tone that seems somewhat unnatural. Victor, meanwhile, remains petrified, his already pale complexion turning grey. He opens his mouth, but no sound emerges. His gaze flits between his wife and the two men in front of him, unable to formulate a coherent thought. The security officer then speaks, his deep and authoritative voice cutting through the air. We have also reviewed the surveillance camera footage, as protocol dictates in situations like this. This will help us understand what happened and ensure the safety of all. A new wave of whispers spreads through the room. Eyes turn to Elizabeth, who remains frozen, her hands clenched on the table. Her eyes narrow imperceptibly, a nearly imperceptible flash of nervousness betraying a quick thought, an attempt to regain control over the damage. The maitre d' continues, his voice relentless. After reviewing the recordings, it became clear that the substance was introduced into the glass by... He pauses, his gaze fixed on Elizabeth. You, Mrs. Devereux. A deafening silence falls over the room, heavier than anything that had preceded it. Elizabeth remains frozen, her control facade cracking under the pressure. Her eyes, wide open, search for an escape, but the revelation is irreversible. Around her, the murmurs resume, but this time with an almost chaotic intensity. The guests lean toward each other, exchanging quick and excited comments. That's impossible, Elizabeth finally exclaims, her voice shattered by emotion. There must be a mistake. I didn't do anything like that. But the accusing glances and the irrefutable evidence from the cameras leave no room for doubt. Victor, still silent, leans back slightly, as though trying to distance himself from his own wife, his expression shifting from shock to anger. The security officer approaches. Madam, we will need to ask you to come with us to clarify this situation. Elizabeth, trapped, casts one last desperate glance at Victor, her pleading eyes searching for a glimmer of support, a refuge, an alliance in this storm she feels closing in on her. But Victor turns his eyes away, his face frozen in a cold, almost disgusted expression. This gesture, crueler than any words, shatters the last vestiges of control Elizabeth had been trying to maintain. She falters slightly, her mask of the invulnerable woman cracking to reveal a panic she can no longer conceal. The security officers approach her, their movements calm but firm, signaling politely but firmly that she must follow them. Elizabeth, initially motionless like a statue, finally stands, her body tense, her movements mechanical, as though she cannot accept what is happening. Her dress, once splendid and elegant, suddenly feels too heavy, an unbearable burden in this moment of public humiliation. Around her, the whispers grow louder, like a rising tide. The guests, fascinated and horrified, exchange knowing glances, some whispering to their neighbors speculations about Elizabeth's motivations, others secretly savoring the spectacular fall of this woman once so high in society. Can you believe it? Whispers a woman in a sparkling evening gown. An attempted poisoning. In a place like this. An older man, a cigar still unlit in his hand, nods with a mix of indignation and delight. The Devereux, Untouchable? Look at them now. What was supposed to be an elegant and social evening has turned into a monumental scandal, a scene that no one will forget. The Devereux name, once synonymous with prestige, is now tainted by a poisoned intrigue, an indelible stain on their flawless reputation. Not far from there, the homeless boy, a silent witness to everything that has unfolded, stands tall, his shoulders slightly raised, chin lifted. This is not the posture of a mere spectator, but that of a bearer of truth, a modest yet imposing presence in this theater of shattered illusions. His worn clothes and frail figure contrast with the opulence of the room, with the glittering chandeliers and the sumptuous outfits of the guests. Yet, in this precise moment, he embodies a strength that nothing can overshadow, that of justice, raw and relentless. His gaze, fixed on Elizabeth as she is escorted out of the room, is neither filled with hatred nor triumph. It is calm, almost compassionate, yet devoid of fear. He seeks neither vengeance nor glory, but seems to embody a universal truth. Lies and injustice are always eventually revealed. In this role he never sought to play, he has become a symbol, a reminder that the humblest can sometimes bring down the most powerful. Victor, standing a few meters away, watches him in turn. The expression on his face has changed. No longer the arrogant and indifferent man he was just moments ago. The events of the evening have transformed him, even broken him. His slumped shoulders betray the weight of both shame and recognition. This boy, whom he had ignored, perhaps even scorned, has saved his life. And he knows it. Taking a deep breath, Victor slowly steps toward the boy. The murmurs around them fade as all eyes turn to them. The opulence of Victor's perfectly tailored suit contrasts with the almost heartbreaking simplicity of the boy's clothes. But at this moment, the difference between them seems to vanish. Standing before him, Victor hesitates for a moment, searching for the right words. He slightly lowers his head, an almost humble gesture, unusual for a man of his status. He begins, but his voice falters slightly. He swallows, then continues, more firmly. I want to thank you. You saved my life tonight. The boy remains silent, his gaze still calm but attentive. Victor continues, his tone filled with emotion. I also need to apologize to you. He pauses, his face reddening slightly from the effort of the confession. Before all of this, I didn't even notice you. I was blind to everything that didn't fit into my world, my bubble of selfishness and privilege. But tonight you opened my eyes. A shiver runs through the room. Some guests, moved by the unusual sincerity of Victor, whisper among themselves, while others watch the scene with silent fascination. Victor straightens slightly, but his gaze remains fixed on the boy, waiting for a reaction, a word, something. The boy, after a long moment of silence, slightly tilts his head in acceptance. Then, in a soft but firm voice, he responds, You don't need to thank me or apologize. What I did because it was right. Not for a reward. Not for forgiveness. These words, simple yet full of wisdom, seem to strike Victor to the core. He slowly nods, his expression reflecting a deep, almost painful gratitude. Then let me at least do something for you, he says with newfound determination. Tell me what you need. Anything. The boy, surprised by the offer, hesitates for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, he responds, If you really want to do something, help those like me. Those who no one sees. A deep silence falls over the room. Victor stands frozen, touched by the request, before responding with a simple but powerful, I will. Victor looks at the boy for a moment, still moved by the exchange of words. The weight of the request resonates deeply within him, and although he doesn't immediately know how to respond, he understands that this gesture will mark a turning point in his life. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, harden with a new resolve. The boy turns to walk away, but Victor calls out to him in a lower, almost hesitant voice. Wait. The boy turns, his calm gaze settling on him. Come have dinner with me tonight, Victor proposes, the words coming out more spontaneously than he had expected. I will give you rewards, but not the ones you expect. They won't be goods or privileges. Tonight, I want you to be here to see a change. The boy looks at him intently, as though evaluating the sincerity of the offer. Then, after a moment, he nods. He didn't need grand material rewards, but perhaps this act of good faith, this symbolic gesture from Victor, would be a start towards something greater. The dinner takes place in an unusual calm, far from the noise of the crowded ballroom where Elizabeth's humiliation is still fresh in everyone's mind. Around the table, only Victor and the boy, who we learn is named Malik, seem to be engaged in a conversation that goes far beyond the superficial expectations of the world around them. As the hours pass, Victor realizes that he has never been more vulnerable. Malik speaks with a wisdom Victor has never encountered in his privileged circles. He listens, without judgment, without seeking to flatter. He has seen the true nature of Victor, and it is this brutal honesty that has become his most precious gift. Leaving the dinner, Victor makes the decision to follow Malik's request. Far from just giving money or superficial opportunities, he commits to offering a space for voices like Malik's to be heard. He knows that this act of solidarity is just the beginning of a long journey of self-reflection. But for the first time, he feels the heavy responsibility of using his privilege to repair what has been broken. "I will keep my promise," Victor murmurs as he turns to Malik. "We will change things, together."